Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, this is Michèle at Jasami Bookworm Podcast, and we are starting off February and 2025 with the fantastic follow-up with Levitt in New York, and it's part 2 of the interview that we did from late last year. Welcome, Levitt.
Hi, Michèle. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. We learned so much about, dyslexia and how it's different with every other person. And this time I kind of wanted to chat more about the creativity. If there's certain rules, I've got my questions for you that have been submitted. But the first thing we have to do is you've done phenomenal work. You've written novels. So please tell our audience about the novels that you've written.
Yeah, so far I've written 2 novels in the Tales of Palalion series, which I'm hoping to create a trilogy out of. The first one is 2, The Tale of Light and Darkness, and the second one is 3, The Tale of Time.
And I am delighted to say that we will be putting in the link into the description. So if they want to purchase it, it's available both in the UK and in the US. You'll be adding another avenue for distribution in the US through the bookstores, the big bookstores, Barnes and Noble. I knew I would remember it. I forgot Barnes. How can I forget Barnes and Noble? I love Barnes and
Yeah.
Noble. I used to camp out there. So it will be available in Barnes and Noble very soon. We're going to put that link in as well. So for the books the novels that you've written, where did the idea for it or for them generate from?
So I started working on 2, The Tale of Light and Darkness during the 2020 lockdown period after I found a notebook that my 6th grade old self wrote a bunch of little notes about a story when he was bored in English class. And I took that because I was bored one day, put it onto my Mac, and then expanded onto the story. And that became the first novel. And then I ended the first novel with a little cliffhanger, and I was like, okay, this would be good in order to write a second one. And then a year or 2 later, I had a lot of free time, and I was like, I'm going to write the second one now. And it just followed the journey of the main character.
So where did the characters come from? Do they have little bits and pieces of yourself? Are they totally different? Tell us a little bit about the protagonist, please.
Yeah, so it follows a 10-year-old boy on an almost 10-year journey where he loses his memory and is trying to find himself and who he was before losing his memory, and then use that and all the pieces of his memory to become the person he's meant to be while being guided by an old wizard, I'll call him, just an older mentor who's trying to save the galaxy from darkness. So everybody has their own motive and everybody wants something from someone, but it's really following this young boy and how he is able to figure out his own destiny and who he is meant to be. And I think that was drawn really from growing up with dyslexia and being taught different ways to learn and different strategies, but finding which one works best for you and utilizing that to become the learner, the artist, the creator that you're meant to be.
I think that's fantastic because what came to my mind was this your journey? And creating that, and it's so inspirational. It gives people hope when they can do it. I believe in stories, providing, an underlying story of support and such in there. So, is it a fantasy? Does it take place in reality? Where does it take place? Because now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, no, it's an off-world fantasy. I created a whole little galaxy, but I would call it like more of an ethical fantasy because there's a lot of questions and moral dilemmas that each character goes through and has to figure out. So there's real world issues and problems that like we as humans face, but for these other kinds of people somewhere far away.
An off-world, and that does come through on quite a few movies and such. I recently watched the uh, original original Blade Runner, and it was off-world. Was supposed to be the place to go because the world that they were living in was so difficult. But in this story, it sounds like the off-world kind of reflects our own. But it's nice when we're taking out of our own circumstances because then we can look at it as a fantasy. So my next question is, Levitt, did you have a specific writing process that you followed? Did you have a structure? Did you do an outline first and then write every day, or what process did you follow?
Yeah, so for the first book, To the Tale of Light and Darkness, because it was written during like the lockdown period, I would just spend probably from like 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., which was not the healthiest of habits, just writing and using what I call like stream of consciousness writing, where there was no outline. It was just everything pouring out of my brain per each character's journey. And then tweaking it along the way to make sure it all fits in a linear line that follows the path of the book. But for Three, The Tale of Time, the second one, I was like very rigorous on outlining how each chapter was going to go, where each character started and where each character ended, and then just like fill in the middle portion.
Yes. So for the characters, did you write character descriptions, or did they just come alive when you were writing?
I kind of like both. The, how would I put it? I came up with the characters in my head and inserted them into the story. And then later on, when they became more prevalent and prominent in the book and books, that's when I started like giving backstory to them outside of the book on just like Word documents to know what was needed to be added and what I could leave out and have the reader just imagine.
And that's part of it, is that when we read a story, sometimes we, as a reader, we can empathize with the character, or we see certain characteristics in it that reflect on our own, and that it gives a great opportunity for self-examination. Not that it's heavy when you're reading a book, but I think it happens um, just naturally, almost naturally. I know I reflect on different characters and such. So, do you have a favorite character in the book? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot because uh, it's sometimes we can love, the bad guy, or a silly little character in a book. One of our other authors, it's a reptilian character and he's so cool and I just love him. So, do you have a favorite character that you created?
I think my best answer, because I'm like drafting out the outline for the last book still, would be I like each character at different moments in time because I relate to each one of them, not all the time, but there are certain snippets that I relate to, that the character like contributes to the story. I
Do
would say like the cop out, but probably the most realistic answer is the main character because he's the most like me. But I do like all of like his friends, the antagonist, his mentor, because they all provide pieces of me in certain ways, but also just the way their stories unfold is interesting to me, especially because I'm writing it. And so I like them at different points of dilemma, conflict, and then resolution.
and that's the arc of the story. It's that you create the part of uh, the protagonist and what the problem is, and then the other part, the major part of the middle third is everything's preventing them from achieving that. And the last is kind of the resolution. And when we say resolution as writers, when you say resolution, it's not necessarily that it's going to be a happy ending, but the resolution could be a cliffhanger for the next story, which I think is I think that's important to say, especially when you've created a world. The world that you've created, what do you think is the most unusual part that's different from the one we live in,
Um, Most unusual part.
or different
I would say that there's three things. The first is that there are four worlds in the story, and they were created at like the dawn of time via like the birth of mythical beasts and then like shards that turn into swords, which the stories are based on, are like implanted into those worlds. So like the creation of the worlds themselves are very different than any known creation of our world. That would be number one. Number two is throughout most of the first book, there's just like this giant looming shroud that corrupts mostly everyone's mind and makes them do the bidding of like the tyrant, who's the main antagonist. And whether we relate that to, I guess that could be semi-related to like social media nowadays, but when I was thinking about it, I was just thinking about like this mystical black shroud that like literally corrupted your mind. And then the third would be that the main characters have control over attributes which are similar to like elements like fire, water, rocks and stone and metal. So because they're able to control those with the use of their sword or eventually their hands, which becomes a plot point to the stories, that's like no human can do that here.
That's true, unfortunately. Though in all of the Wizarding Worlds and with Superman and such, we do have those places we love to visit. And I think that gives our imagination such a wonderful foundation in order to kind of look at it and live in that and have that to who knows, someday, we might through our minds be able to control things, which would be totally cool, but I don't think they'll have it in my lifetime, Levitt, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be cool. It could be dangerous, but it would be cool. But I don't know when that could or would happen.
So to completely change what you've been working on, so you've written those novels, you're working on the other novel. In the meantime, you decided to create a completely different world with your comic slash graphic novel, Crystal Go. And to refresh about that, where did Crystal Go originate from?
I was on a trip with my family in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we were walking through, I think it was Los Alamos, and I saw a bunch of like rocks and shiny crystals and things, and I picked them up and I was really into like card games. at the time. And I was like, I've never seen a card game based around like crystals and power units for crystals. So I came up with the card game that's played by the characters in the comic book first. And then I developed a whole world around that and turned it into like a professional sport and arena game. And that, unlike the trilogy of novels that I'm working on slash had written, is based like in Earth, on Earth. So there are real locations that these characters in Crystal go to that an average Joe who lives here can actually go to.
Oh, excellent. And Santa Fe, New Mexico is absolutely beautiful. I love to visit there. It's just so anybody that can travel to any of those areas, it's just lovely to see, and the scenery, while different, has its own stunning beauty. So so the ideas were created, and of course, a comic slash graphic novel, as I say, is very visual. So the characters, are really true to life. The circumstances, would it's a lot of imagery rather than a lot of text, while there is text in it. What gave you the ideas? And I have to say at this point in time, because we are fortunate enough to be working on the project of creating Crystal Go, and I will give a shout out at the end as to who we're going to thank for the illustrations and the creativity. What gave you the idea? You came to us with certain ideas and panels. How was that created, Levitt?
I wrote the story first so I could get it out of my head and then like went back to it and reread it and retweaked like movements to make it more physical because of course when you're like thinking about something and imagining something it's not going to be how like a real everyday person like moves until you re-look at it. And so because I was able to visualize it, I then went to someone and was like, could you like make mock-up drawings of these? And then they were able to do that. And I was like, okay, this is good because this is close to what I was seeing in my head. And I know that I, being dyslexic, used to grow up like reading graphic novels and comic books to assist with learning and the process of reading as someone with dyslexia. It was easier to like look at visuals and then also have words of motion and dialogue. And I wanted to give give that back to the same community that I grew up in. So that's where like the idea of creating a comic book came from. And then because I can't draw and it's harder for me to visualize things, I needed some assistance with that, but I knew exactly like how I wanted everything laid out and what I wanted everything to look like. It's just I can't pen to paper it as well as other people can.
Well, it's lovely to have t talent, and obviously, as a writer, you have talent. In creating stories, you have talent. And across the board, you've got other, I think, musical talents and such, which is totally different from what we're discussing. But we can, I think it's about the creativity that lives within us, and that although there is a challenge with dyslexia, it doesn't mean that your creativity is diminished or shunted at all, does it?
No, I think it's expanded and living more, what's the word, like vibrantly in other forms.
I think that's very well said, that it's very important. So you came up with that idea. We're going to discuss that graphics in a moment. So with the process of creating the graphic novel, it's the writing first, and then it's kind of like a children's book, a children's picture book. You have to write the text first, and then from it come the illustrations become part of it. Is there a character in the graphic novel that I know that when she suffers from dyslexia, but are there other characters in it that are a reflection of you or someone else that you've known that helps create the variety of characters?
I would say like the main character's friends all have qualities from me, and because it's based mostly in a summer camp, like a sleepaway camp, I loosely based it off of one that I was fortunate enough to go to as a teenager. And so I took like my experiences from being an everyday camper from there and moved it into this comic book. And so the interactions I had with other campers or just talking to them and seeing how they were feeling were transposed or translated into Crystal Go via other characters. So it's a similar situation where every character has a bit of me, but now these characters, because they're more real and based off of like real interactions in a real world, they have elements of my friends from back in my teenage years and just other kids that I was interacting with. The drastic story arcs for each character are drastically different than any normal person would go through, but there are elements of like wanting to please other people. One character struggles with that. Another character struggles with like always feeling alone and having no one to go to. The main one struggles with dyslexia and the loss of a family member and how that can really affect like your mental well-being and always feeling secluded. So there are like feelings imbued into each character that I have unfortunately and fortunately had the pleasure of feeling and know that they relate to most people. And so again, I would say I relate mostly to the main character, but there's hints of myself and like my friends in other characters. And because of that, in Crystal Go, I like more of a variety of the characters and what they bring to the main character's journey.
And I think there's one point that you made, Levitt, is that the reason for the creation of this is to help support the dyslexic community, to give back from what you've learned and to give to the community to help support the community itself. And I think that that is such it's such a wonderful attribute about yourself, but also in giving back to the community and helping others. There might be one person or 10 or however many that we're going to reach out to that will be positively affected by it. And then their creativity that they feel that they want to, have bloom will be successful because they've been inspired by Crystal Go and by yourself. I think that's wonderful. So I'm going to give a little clap here.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you.
and part of the reason that I'm going to say that is as Jasami, as a small independent publisher, a not-for-profit company, we're a not-for-profit community interest company. And that was the reason that we wanted to work on this project with you, is that we have a commitment to community, but also we want to support those who might be disadvantaged in many ways that will not be able to get the story out there, but especially support those who want to give back to the community and who want to, the dyslexic community and others that are challenged, to be able to help support them. And so I will say this now, in that we'll have a link in shortly for the crowdfunding campaign, because as a not-for-profit, we do reach out to the community itself for support. And we have a large program coming out in the next couple of weeks that we'll be releasing. And we'll be discussing that in a future podcast in about a month or so. But it's very important that we are supported, because the support that it works full circle. the support we receive, we give it to you, and then you, as the creator of Crystal Go, support in your story the community itself, and then it comes back. So it's quite a symbiotic relationship, but also benefits the community, which is what we're all about. So I thank you for that, Levitt.
Yeah, I think it's important to give back and then give to the people that come after us. I think that growing up with dyslexia and other learning disabilities and going to schools that specialize in teaching students with various learning disabilities, it helped me understand how other students operate and in their minds. And so it's easy to like relate to my fellow peers, but I also see struggle within that. And I know the world has been more accepting recently, or like since I was a kid, to people with learning disabilities, and then to add to that world and show the people with dyslexia that like it's okay to be different and you will find your place. Just like follow through with whatever you want to do because you're the best at doing what you want to do for yourself and for others. It's a good feeling to know that you have other people that you might not even know that are in your corner and that have been through it and know there's a way to get through it and work with your learning disability.
And I think that that's very important, Levitt, that people won't feel so much alone, uh, as you said in one of the characters earlier in the comic books, in the comic book Crystal Go. It's when one feels alone, there's no one else that will understand. And it creates that I can't do anything. But reaching out and saying, I'm not the only one who has this, and then understanding how successful people can be with it. And that provides hope. And hope is an essential in life that we all need. It's the hope which creates the desires and the dreams to come true. And as I said, I so admire wanting to give back to the community. And I think that's a perfect note to wrap up with. And of course, I'm going to put you on the spot again and say, who would you like to give your shout out to at the end of this podcast, Levitt?
I'll give my shout out because we're ending on such a beautiful note to anyone who's listening that feels like they're alone or feels that they're struggling with something, albeit a paper or a lifestyle change or some drastic change in, yeah, a lifestyle change would be a drastic change in your life. I'm giving my shout out to you just so you know that you have someone that if I don't know you, if I know you, like I'm always there for you. You can always reach out and I'll do my best to not only understand where you're coming from, but help you find the solution because I think that's the most important thing. I won't be a crutch, but I'll be there to help guide. And so that's where my shout out goes. It goes to everybody who needs a friend.
Excellent. That's wonderful. And I, again, thank you for the support. My shout out is very specific this time. It's to Shahan, who is working with you to create those beautiful characters and illustrate them in the comic that's going to be coming out. And it takes such an empathy, but also the creativity. I always remember when he, submitted some initial drawings, and it was the difference I saw in the emotion that was created in that particular panel. And you could see it, and that I think is such a talent. So my shout out is to Shahan. Thank you very much for being part of this team. We also have Karina, who's managing the crowdfunding team, and lots, as I said earlier, lots more information coming out. Levitt, as always, so interesting to have our conversations. Thank you for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And This is Michèle at Jasami Bookworm Podcast, start of 2025. I know it's February, but we've been busy in January. Anyway, start of 2025. I hope it's a wonderful year for everyone else. We've got lots of exciting things and great podcasts coming up. So I thank you all. And as always, I wish you a sunny day.
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.